At 06:03 hours local time, 12 Ukrainian drones lifted off from a staging area in Sumy Oblast. Their target, the 100th Grau Arsenal near Nea, 930 kilometers to the northeast. The deepest strike ever attempted against a Russian ammunition depot. But to reach it, this trick had to work first. A Russian radar operator in Bryansk Oblast noticed the first contacts at 06:21. Faint returns at the edge of his coverage, sharpening as they pushed east. He counted 12 signatures, maybe 13. Each one painted a radar cross-section consistent with a cruise missile, the kind of return that gets your attention at 6 in the morning. He flagged the tracks and forwarded the data up the chain. 3 minutes later, the information landed on the scope of a Buck M2 battery commander 70 kilometers north. A man who was about to spend $4.8 million in missiles shooting down $33,000 worth of plastic and foam. He studied the contacts on his display, 12 confirmed tracks, pushing northeast at 160 kilometers per hour, altitude steady between 600 and 900 meters. Terrain following flight profiles, disciplined spacing. The signatures were substantial, 400 to 500 kilograms each based on the radar returns. Current range, 58 kilometers. At their present speed, they would enter his 50-kilometer engagement envelope in approximately 4 minutes. And here's where the trap snapped shut. His Buck carried 4 ready rounds on the rails. The math was simple but brutal. 4 missiles, 12 contacts. Reload time, 6 to 8 minutes. At their current speed, the contacts would cross his position in approximately 4 minutes. He had 1 magazine to stop a swarm that outnumbered his ammunition 3 to 1. Reload time after that, 6 to 8 minutes. The contacts were doing anything except flying northeast in a straight line. They could be cruise missiles. They could be decoys. They could be some new Ukrainian system he'd never seen before. But they were headed deeper into Russia, and nobody gets promoted for letting cruise missiles through while asking questions. He made the call any competent commander would make. At 06:27, he ordered the first launch. 2 missiles roared off the rails, accelerating to 3 times the speed of sound as they climbed toward the intercept point. The fire control radar held lock on the lead contacts, feeding guidance corrections as the missiles closed at nearly 1 kilometer per second, 38 seconds to intercept, 30, 20. The first warhead detonated at 06:28. A flash over Bryansk as 12,000 steel fragments tore through an 8.9-kilogram plastic decoy. The radar return vanished. The Buck commander logged a successful intercept. He had no idea he'd just spent enough money to buy a luxury apartment, destroying something that cost less than a bicycle. He ordered the second launch at 06:31. 2 more missiles, 2 more intercepts. 2 more contacts vanished from his scope. His Buck was now empty. 4 ready rounds expended in 4 minutes. The transloader vehicle pulled alongside to begin the reload process. Hydraulics whined. Missile canisters shifted on their rails. 6 minutes minimum before he could fire again. The remaining 8 contacts would cross his position in 5. He reported the engagement up the chain and requested support, proud of his 100% hit rate. What he didn't report, because he didn't know, was that he'd just been played. 8 remaining contacts crossed his position at 06:36. 60 kilometers east, a Tor M2 battery near Smolensk picked up the swarm at 06:37. The Tor is Russia's short-range point defense system. 8 ready missiles designed to swat cruise missiles out of the sky at ranges up to 12 kilometers. Against actual cruise missiles, it's genuinely dangerous. Against decoys flying deliberately outside its envelope, it was about as useful as a guard dog behind a fence. The battery commander studied the tracks on his scope. Bearing 243, range 31 kilometers. But the contacts weren't heading toward him. They were heading north, angling to pass 18 kilometers outside his engagement envelope. He couldn't reach them from here. The commander considered repositioning, moving the Tor northwest to cut off the contact's flight path. But the Tor's wheeled chassis could cover 40 kilometers per hour at best on these roads. By the time he moved, the contacts would be long gone. He tracked them passively and reported what he was seeing. At 06:38, an S-300 battery 120 kilometers east of Smolensk began tracking the swarm. The S-300 is designed for high-altitude threats, aircraft at 60,000 feet, ballistic missiles on their descent trajectory. Its 48 N6 missiles can reach 150 kilometers, far enough to engage the contacts from here. But the system's radar was built for targets above the terrain clutter, not cruise missiles hugging the Earth at 800 meters. The fire control solution flickered on the commander's display. Lock, lost. Lock, degraded. Lock. He could launch on a partial solution and hope the missile's onboard seekers acquired the targets during the intercept. Hit probability against a low-altitude cruise missile with degraded lock, maybe 40%. At $1.2 million per missile, that was an expensive gamble on bad odds. He reported the situation and requested guidance. At 0639, the Buck battery in Bryansk completed its reload cycle. 4 fresh 9M317s on the rails. The commander checked the geometry. Contacts now bearing 067, range 82 kilometers, heading away. A stern chase at that range would push his missiles to their kinematic limits. They'd burn most of their fuel catching up, leaving little margin for terminal maneuvering. Hit probability against a straight-flying target? Reasonable. Against anything that jinked at the last second? Much worse. He reported ready status and awaited orders. The geometry was garbage and he knew it, but the contacts were still flying northeast, and someone above his pay grade was going to have to make a decision. The Coordination Center's integrated display showed the entire picture. 1 Buck with missiles ready but targets already passed. 1 Tor that couldn't reach the contacts. 1 S-300 with a flickering lock. 8 cruise missile-sized tracks pushing deeper into Russia at 160 kilometers per hour, threading through the gaps between coverage zones. 3 batteries tracking, 12 missiles ready to fire, 0 clean shots. The report landed on the desk of the Regional Air Defense Duty Officer at 0640. He had 2 options. Option 1. Order the batteries to engage with degraded solutions. The Buck and Bryansk could attempt a stern chase. The S-300 could launch on its partial lock. Total missiles required, somewhere between 8 and 16. Cost, $6 to $12 million. Probability of stopping all 8 contacts, low. Option 2. Scramble fighters. 2 Su-35s from Kalino could intercept the swarm in approximately 20 minutes. Each fighter carried 8 R-77 missiles, more than enough to destroy the remaining contacts with shots to spare. Option 2 had one significant drawback. The moment those fighters entered the engagement zone, every SAM battery on the sector would receive an automated weapons hold instruction, standard doctrine to prevent any friendly fire. The ground-based network would go cold until the fighters cleared the airspace. The duty officer checked the clock, 0641. Every minute he waited was another 2.7 kilometers deeper into the motherland. He made his decision. At 0641, the scramble order went out to Kalino Air Base. 2 Su-35 fighters were wheels up in 3 minutes, their engines pushing them northeast at 1,500 kilometers per hour. Their pilots received their targeting data during the climb. 8 cruise missile-sized contacts, bearing 047, range 280 kilometers, altitude 800 meters, speed 160 kilometers per hour, intercept in approximately 14 minutes. The automated instruction propagated through the air defense network at 0649. Weapons hold, all sectors, friendly aircraft operating in engagement zone. Across Bryansk, Smolensk, and Kaluga Oblast, targeting radars went silent. The Buck battery that had just finished reloading lowered its readiness status. The Tor M2 near Smolensk stood down. The S-300 battery further east tracked the contacts passively but kept its fire control radar cold. The airspace belonged to the fighters now. At 0658, the Su-35s made radar contact with remaining targets. They descended to engagement altitude and began prosecuting contacts with their Urbis E radars. The first R-77 leapt its rail at 0701. The missile tracked a contact and maintained course and speed. No evasion, no countermeasures, no reaction at all, and detonated at 0702. The pilots worked through the swarm methodically. One contact after another vanished from their scopes. At 0713, the flight lead reported the engagement zone clear. 8 contacts destroyed. Threat neutralized. The Su-35s turned to Kalino to rearm. Across western Russia, SAM batteries came back online, their radars sweeping empty skies. The duty officer logged the engagement as a successful intercept of a Ukrainian cruise missile strike. He never learned what he'd actually destroyed. The objects that went down over Bryansk and Smolensk that morning weren't cruise missiles. They were Hakai-20s, Ukrainian decoys weighing 8.9 kilograms each. built from plastic and foam, carrying a secret device called a Lundberg lens mounted inside each decoy's fuselage. A Lundberg lens is a sphere made of concentric dielectric shells, basically layers of material with carefully calibrated densities that bend radar waves in a very specific way. When a radar pulse hits a normal object, most of the energy scatters in random directions. Only a fraction bounces back to the receiver. But a Lundberg lens captures incoming radar waves and focuses them like a mirror, reflecting nearly all the energy directly back at the source. The effect is dramatic. An 8.9 kilogram drone suddenly paints a radar return 15 times larger than its actual size. To the Buck's fire control radar, each Hakai-20 looked like a 400 kilogram cruise missile. To the Su-35's Urbis E, same thing. The operators had no way to tell the difference without visual confirmation. And by the time the fighters got close enough to see what they were shooting at, the engagement was already over. And they had played their part perfectly. 40 kilometers south of the engagement zone, flying at 200 meters altitude, 9 AN-196 Luti drones had spent the last 24 minutes threading through airspace where every SAM battery was offline and every fighter was focused 600 meters above them. And they had 740 kilometers still to go. At the other end sat something Russia never expected Ukraine to find, and certainly never expected them to reach. 9 AN-196 Lutis pushed northeast at 20 meters altitude, their terrain following systems keeping them just above the tree line. The gap had brought them about 50 kilometers, but over 800 kilometers of hostile airspace still remained, and the weapons hold that had opened the corridor behind them didn't extend to the batteries ahead. At 0847, the first Luti encountered problems. The drone had been threading between two radar coverage zones east of Tula when its Skynode navigation system encountered a problem. The terrain below didn't match the satellite imagery stored in its memory. What should have been open farmland was now a half-frozen reservoir. The water level had risen 3 meters since the imagery was captured, changing the shoreline geometry the system used for positioning. The Luti's flight computer tried to reconcile the mismatch. It cross-referenced surrounding features, searching for landmarks it could recognize. The system found a road junction 2 kilometers north that matched its stored imagery and corrected course. But the 47-second delay had pushed the drone 800 meters off its planned route, directly into the detection envelope of a Tor M2 battery guarding a rail junction outside Tula. The Tor's crew had 8 seconds from detection to launch. They used 4. At 0903, a second Luti encountered a different problem. The drone's Chinese-manufactured engine had been running at 85% throttle for 3 hours. The piston temperature was climbing past design limits. Fuel consumption had increased 12% as the engine worked harder to maintain speed. The math was simple but brutal. The drone would run dry 40 kilometers short of the target. Its flight computer had no way to solve this equation. The Luti maintained course and speed until 0947, when the engine seized over Nizhny Novgorod Oblast. The drone glided for 90 seconds before impacting an empty field. No explosion. The warhead's arming sequence required a valid target lock to initiate. At 10:31, a third Luti flew too close to a Panzer battery escorting a military convoy. The battery commander faced the same decision the Buck commander had faced 4 hours earlier. An unidentified contact at low altitude, heading somewhere deeper into Russia. He had no weapons hold order, no friendly aircraft in his sector, no reason not to engage. 2 missiles left the rails at 10:32. The first connected at 10:33. 6 Lutis remained. The Ukrainians had planned for 40% losses. They were at 33% and still 520 kilometers from the target. The math was still positive, barely. The survivors pushed on, adjusting course around the positions that had just revealed themselves, threading through coverage gaps the mission planners had identified weeks earlier using something called Skynode. This is what made the Luti different from every Ukrainian drone that had come before. Previous long-range strikes had relied on GPS navigation, satellite signals that Russian jamming systems could degrade or spoof. A spoofed GPS signal could convince a drone it was 50 kilometers from where it actually was, sending it careening into empty forest, or worse, back toward friendly territory. Russian EW units had become very good at this. The Skynode solved the problem by ignoring satellites entirely. The system works like using your hand by night to navigate to the bathroom, comparing what it sees through its camera to high-resolution terrain maps loaded before launch. No signal to jam, no data link to intercept, just a computer matching shapes to shapes at 160 kilometers per hour. The comparison wasn't perfect. Seasonal changes could throw off the matching. Snow cover, water levels, new construction. The system needed daylight or strong moonlight to work best, which is why the mission launched at dawn. But it was good enough. 6 Lutis crossed into Kostroma Oblast at 14:23, still flying at 20 meters, still running dark. The 100th Grau Arsenal sat 12 kilometers ahead. The facility sprawled across 2 square kilometers of birch forest northeast of Nea. Bunkers, warehouses, hard stands, rail sidings. The drone's cameras captured the target for the first time at 14:26. What they recorded would later be transmitted to Ukrainian intelligence via a burst transmission. The imagery showed an active facility, trucks moving between storage bunkers, forklifts loading pallets, and on a rail siding at the eastern ridge of the complex, 4 flat cars carrying crated cargo that didn't match anything in the Russian military inventory. The crates were too large for standard artillery shells, wrong shape for MLRS rockets. The markings weren't Cyrillic. Whatever Russia had stored there, it hadn't come from a Russian factory. The Panzer battery protecting the arsenal detected the first inbound contact at 14:27. The operator studied his display. 1 track at first, low and fast, bearing 237, range 18 kilometers. Then a second contact appeared at bearing 194. Then a third at 261. The drones weren't flying in formation. They were approaching from different directions, converging on the depot from 3 separate vectors. He had 1 system, 2 guns, and 3 targets closing in. The Panzer's tracking radar can follow multiple contacts simultaneously. Its twin 30mm autocannons can engage targets at ranges up to 4 kilometers, firing 5,000 rounds per minute combined. Against a single inbound drone, the geometry is simple. Against 3 drones from 3 directions, the math gets complicated fast. The guns can only point one direction at a time. Slewing from one target to another takes 2 seconds. Acquiring a stable firing solution takes another 1.5 seconds. A burst sufficient to ensure destruction requires 3 seconds of sustained fire. Total engagement cycle, 6.5 seconds per target. At 160 kilometers per hour, a drone covers 290 meters in 6.5 seconds. The operator designated the closest threat, the contact at bearing 237, now 11 kilometers out, and initiated the engagement sequence. The guns traversed, the radar locked. At 4 kilometers, the autocannons opened fire. The first Luti came apart in a shower of composite fragments at 14:28. The operator immediately slewed to the second target, bearing 194, now inside 6 kilometers. The guns traversed, the radar searched. Lock, the autocannons fired. The second Luti went down at 14:29. But the third drone was already inside 3 kilometers. And as the operator slewed to engage, 3 more contacts appeared on his scope, the remaining Lutis, approaching from the north in loose formation 8 kilometers out. The northern group had timed their approach perfectly. While the Panzer engaged the first 3 targets from the south and west, the remaining Lutis had swung wide around the facility's eastern perimeter, using a forested ridgeline to mask their approach. The Panzer's radar had been focused on the active engagements, tracking, locking, and firing. By the time the operator cleared the third target and swept north, the second wave was already inside 8 kilometers and closing fast. He had 6 seconds to engage the closed target. The northern group would cover 3 kilometers in that time. The autocannons found the third Luti at 2.1 kilometers. The burst walked across its flight path. Fragments sprayed. The drone staggered but kept flying. The warhead in its nose was already armed. At 14:30, the first Luti struck a storage bunker in the southern section of the complex. The 75-kilogram shape-charged warhead detonated on impact, punching through the bunker's concrete roof. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the contents of the bunker, artillery shells stacked floor to ceiling, began cooking off. The second impact came 4 seconds later. Northern section, a warehouse full of crated rockets. The third impact hit a hard stand where trucks had been loading ammunition 20 minutes earlier. The fourth Luti, the one the Panzer had damaged but not destroyed, dove into the rail siding at the eastern edge of the complex, the crates with the non-Cyrillic markings. The detonation was different, brighter, hotter. Secondary explosions rippled across the facility, ammunition cooking off in chain reactions, propellant igniting, warheads detonating in the storage crates. The sound reached Nea 3 kilometers away, a rolling thunder that didn't stop. Later analysis figured out why there'd been such a massive explosion. The crates with non-Cyrillic markings were Korean. These were KN-23 ballistic missiles, North Korea's answer to the Iskander. Weapons Russia couldn't manufacture domestically, shipped 6,000 kilometers across the Asian continent to a depot they thought Ukraine would never reach. They thought wrong. Bye for now.